welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching World Today. It's almost a year since the Russia-Ukraine war erupted with Moscow's invasion on February 24, 2022. But it was on the back of European brinkmanship over Ukraine's entry into NATO. And NATO is once again the focus this week, with Sweden and Finland seeking NATO security through membership owing to the war and the threat and possibility of Russians at their borders should Ukraine fall. But Turkey refuses to play and has blocked Sweden's membership bid. Why? We tell you.
Sweden and Finland have long pursued policies of former military non-alignment, but Russia's invasion of Ukraine has prompted a rethink. The Ukraine-Russia war is now a battle of who blinks first, and the threat of a spillover into the Europeans' neighborhood. Swedish and Finnish hopes of quickly joining NATO has run into an obstacle in the form of objections by Turkey, which holds veto powers over accession to the military alliance. After long negotiations, the three nations reached an agreement on how to proceed before the NATO summit in Madrid in June 2022.
I would like to emphasize, however, that the basis of the starting process of a ratification by the Parliament in Ankara has been the trilateral memorandum signed at the NATO summit last year by Sweden and Finland and Turkey. And we believe that we have now come to a point, reached a point, where Sweden and Finland have done what we committed ourselves to in this memorandum. And it is time for the Turkish Parliament to begin the ratification process.
But Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that Sweden is not keeping its side of the bargain. This week, he postponed accession talks indefinitely.
Swedish government does not need to mention about the rights and freedom to us. If you really do respect rights and freedom, at first you need to respect Turkish Republic or Muslim religious beliefs. If you do not show that respect, I'm sorry, you will not see any support from us regarding NATO issue.
Adding fuel to the fire, the Quran burning carried out Rasmus Paludan, leader of Danish far-right political party Hardline, during a protest in Stockholm on 21st January, has ignited protests across Islamic countries. Paludan, who also has Swedish citizenship, has held several demonstrations in the past, where he has burnt the Quran. In the permit he obtained from police, it says his protest was held against Islam and what it called Turkish President Erdogan's attempt to influence freedom of expression in Sweden. Turkey also says Sweden harbors militants from the banned Kurdistan Workers' Party. The PKK is a designated terrorist group in Turkey, Sweden, the United States and Europe. In Madrid last year, Finland and Sweden agreed to work harder to fight terrorism, including intensifying work on the extradition and deportation of suspected militants. But Sweden's courts have blocked some cases. However, the shadow of Russia's proximity to Turkey is also being viewed as the underlying reason of Erdogan backing out. Strategically, Sweden and Finland plug a hole in NATO's front line against Russia while enabling the alliance of project power into the Baltic area. So, what is Erdogan's holding out for? For one, it is domestic considerations with Turkish elections just 6 months away, and the hard posturing helps. Analysts also view possibility of negotiations with the US since Ankara's ties with Washington are strained by Turkey's conflict with Syrian Kurdish militants, who have US support in the fight against Islamic State. Turkey also wants to buy F-16 fighter jets from the United States, but faces objections from some members of the US Congress. Now with Turkey leaving the Madrid agreement in tatters, either Finland could try going it alone or it's back to the negotiating table for all countries, making NATO and its role whether as a reason for a peace or reason for dissonance under scrutiny.
The sudden mass firings at Google, the big tech poster boy of Silicon Valley, has stunned the IT world. The firings symbolize the tumble the tech titans have taken in the past few months, collapsing under their own weight gained during the pandemic boom. Over 100,000 tech employees have lost their jobs since late 2022, and the layoff season seems to have just begun.
Just a month ago, the Google CEO was talking of artificial intelligence, job creation and the Indian stack at Google for India conference in New Delhi. There was no talk, no inkling that Alphabet planned to lay off 12,000 employees in the new year. But layoff it did, shocking the entire IT industry, shaking its roots to the core. Google is not the only one leaving thousands jobless. Microsoft announced 10,000 job cuts last week via an email from CEO Satya Nadella. This includes firings at Microsoft's India Development Center in Hyderabad and at Bengaluru. Amazon fired 18,000 people, increasing the numbers being affected from 10,000 in November. Facebook's parent company Meta also announced it will lay off 11,000 employees. Salesforce reduced its roles by 7,000, nearly 10% of its workforce. Networking giant Cisco terminated 4,000 employees to deal with the economic slowdown. Even Elon Musk fired 3,700 employees at Twitter after buying the microblogging website. CEOs of these companies, from Satya Nadella to Mark Zuckerberg, have given several reasons for these firings. Pichai blamed the dramatic growth during pandemic years for its mass hirings, which were no longer sustainable. According to Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon, the company took the drastic step to lower the costs for its customers. Mark Zuckerberg put the blame on economic downturn, increased competition and loss in ad revenue. Microsoft, meanwhile, says customers accelerated their digital spend during the pandemic and were optimizing it now. The layoffs contagion has also hit India, with some companies resorting to terminations. As reported first by Business Today TV, Wipro fired 450 freshers last week. Hirings have also slowed down in the sector. There are, however, outliers who are going against the flow.
Not about Microsoft, all the tech companies that have been in news. Look at their hiring between 2019 and 2022. Their hiring had to be stepped up because the product needs had gone up 3x or 5x. Now that the products have matured, at some day you need to recognize that we do not need as many people to develop the same products.
Even the global financial sector has witnessed mass job cuts, with titans like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank and Barclays firing thousands of employees. The situation, in fact, is worse than the 2008 financial crisis. Interestingly, the manufacturing sector, which faced the brunt during COVID, is firing on all cylinders now and is attracting talent like never before.
The unbridled and unchecked plastic production has wreaked havoc on nature, specifically on aquatic species. Although several attempts have been made to curb this plastic menace, yet not many countries have shown active participation towards meeting the end goal. Meanwhile, a UN treaty deal with an aim to curb plastic production by 2040 is on the horizon. Take a look at this detailed report.
There's a global plastics treaty on the horizon, one that would cut plastic pollution, some hope entirely, by 2040. It's been described by the UN as the most significant Green Deal since the Paris Climate Accord.
A legally binding solution is now necessary to bring all countries on board.
So, what exactly is being proposed? The UN Environment Programme says the equivalent of one garbage truck worth of plastic is dumped into the ocean every single minute. And greenhouse gas emissions associated with plastics are expected to reach 6.5 gigatons by 2050. UN members first agreed to create a treaty to deal with the plastic problem in March 2022. But not everyone agrees on how to proceed. The UN talks in Uruguay in December 2022 give delegates another chance to discuss the future treaty. Several countries have voiced support for a treaty cracking down on the production of plastic. Japan's Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Hiroshi Ono, spoke at the Reuters Next conference.
So there are many voluntary initiatives to address plastic pollution. But, the increasing pollution suggests that they are clearly not sufficient to address the issue so far. A legally binding solution is now necessary to bring all countries on board and raise awareness of all stakeholders, including general public.
It's the first time Japan has said it would support curbs on plastic production. But such an approach is opposed by the plastics and petrochemical industries. Lobbyist for the American Chemistry Council, Stuart Harris, told Reuters that it would be better to look at the entire life cycle of a product instead.
We need to look at delivery mechanisms for consumers across the life cycle of plastics and across the various uses. But when we start to talk about restricting production, it becomes very complicated because, again, that production doesn't go into a specific application per se. And so restricting production of polyethylene or polypropylene or other different resins will have tremendous negative impacts on the economy.
Harris also says plastic makers need to be more transparent about the chemicals used in their products, as concern mounts about the health impacts of the everyday material finding its way into the food chain and human bodies.
We need a multilateral approach because plastic waste knows no borders.
Jodie Roussel, Public Affairs Lead for Packaging and Sustainability at Nestlé, told the Reuters Next panel she hoped the treaty would help establish global quality controls for plastic, especially recycled plastic.
We want to keep plastics in the economy and out of nature. I think everyone agrees on that. And we recognize that both reuse and recycling can play roles here because reuse can increase with the number of cycles a reusable package is circulated, dramatically reduce the amount of recycling that needs to be built. And thirdly, prevent and remediate hard-to-prevent microplastics and macroplastics from leaking into the environment.
The UN treaty is supposed to be finalized by 2024. Some NGOs that are closely observing the talks have expressed concern about the Paris Agreement-style approach, on the basis that 7 years in, they say it has failed to deliver.
Now, days after the horrific Monterey Park killings, which left California traumatized, another mass shooting incident took place in Half Moon Bay. Rise in mass shooting cases has made the residents of California wonder if gun laws in the country are adequate. Let us look at the issue in detail.
Shock and fear rippled through the Northern California community of Half Moon Bay on January 23rd after 7 victims were shot dead in an agricultural area near San Francisco. This comes days after 11 people were killed at a ballroom dance hall in Monterey Park during the Lunar New Year celebration on January 21st. Both these shooting instances that left Californians shocked are among the bloodiest gun violence cases in decades.
We saw all the sirens going one way and then all the sirens going the other way, and we were like, what is happening? There's something going on, but we just don't know where it is, and that was really terrifying as well.
The Monterey Park suspect has been identified as a 72-year-old Hu Can Tran. This surveillance video shows the Monterey Park suspect being confronted and disarmed by 26-year-old Brandon Say.
I want everyone to focus on the victims of this tragic incident, not to draw too much attention to myself. I'm feeling well, have some trouble sleeping. I've been eating and recalling events, what happened, contemplating the incident. I would say that my mental health is recovering.
Many of those people that you protected that night, they're all okay, and how does that make you feel?
A little prideful, honestly.
The Monterey gunman fled from the scene and later killed himself when approached by police. The Half Moon Bay suspect, identified as Chunli Zhao, was taken into custody by the police after driving to a police parking lot. He was thrown to the ground and searched for weapons. Officials informed that a gun was found in his car. US President Joe Biden ordered flags at the White House and other government agencies to be lowered to half-mast to honor the victims. He also tweeted about the tragedy and asked the countrymen to follow guidelines from local officials and law enforcement.
A time of a cultural celebration, and yet another community has been torn apart by senseless gun violence. So Doug and I joined the President and Dr. Biden, and I know everyone here, in mourning for those who were killed. All of us in this room and in our country understand this violence must stop, and President Biden and I and our administration will continue to provide full support to the local authorities as we learn more.
Many shaken California residents called for greater unity to tackle the long-standing issue of gun violence in the country after paying their respects to the victims of a deadly mass shooting.
FBI and ATF are providing all support possible to our state and local partners, and they will continue to do so. All of us at the Justice Department are committed to doing everything in our power to protect our communities from gun violence and that terrible devastation that it brings.
I'm not saying take everybody's guns and stop that, the extreme, back and forth. Some damn common sense, common dignity. Freedom to walk the damn streets without being fearful. Kids, literally, kids being traumatized over and over again because of these damn drills at school for shooters, and we're not dealing with the damn issue. So that needs to be addressed. I know everybody says, well, it's this incident. Well, you know, it's solved for the pattern. We lead the nation. We know gun safety saves lives, period, full stop. It doesn't save every life. We're not solving for every incident. I get that. We're humbled by it. But no state is outperformed, and you see that. The data bears that out. We got serious about these things.
Data from a non-profit research database, Gun Violence Archive, shows deaths by mass shootings in US have been on the rise since 2014. 9 years ago, 273 deaths were recorded due to gun violence, and the number shot up to 647 in 2022. According to the latest figures from a Swiss-based leading research project, the Small Arms Survey, 390 million guns were in circulation in the US in 2018. The US ratio of 120.5 firearms per 100 residents is far above that of other countries around the world. Despite repeated calls for stricter gun laws, not much change has been seen on the ground, and one of the major reasons for it being the gun rights advocacy groups like the National Rifle Association. With Arushi Mohindra, Bureau Report, India Today.
And we have World at a Glance for you for some other stories from across the globe.
Chris Hipkins has been sworn in as the New Zealand Prime Minister. Hipkins said cost of living would be his government's absolute priority. He replaced Jacinda Ardern after she said she no longer had enough in the tank after steering the country through the COVID-19 pandemic, natural disasters and a gruesome terror attack. Criticizing laws criminalizing homosexuality, Pope Francis said being homosexual isn't a crime. He also urged the Catholic bishops to welcome people from the LGBTQ community into the church. The Pope also said, "We are all children of God and God loves us as we are and for the strength that each of us fights for our dignity." Classified documents have been found at former US Vice President Mike Pence's residence. The documents have been handed to the FBI for investigation. Pence has agreed to fully cooperate with congressional oversight and any questions we have about the matter. Germany said they will be supplying 2 of their Leopard tanks to Ukraine. This comes after weeks of pressure building on German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky thanked Scholz for Germany's important and timely decisions, saying they were a green light for partners to supply similar weapons. The United States Justice Department has sued Google, alleging it uses anti-competitive, exclusionary and unlawful means to eliminate competition for digital advertising revenue. The lawsuit alleged Google has thwarted meaningful competition and deterred innovation in the digital advertising industry.
That's all in this edition of World Today, but before we go, we have some glam for you this week. The Paris Haute Couture Week has been making headlines for its extravagant, surreal, dramatic and luxurious looks. Avant-garde fashion label Victor & Rolf grabbed eyeballs for their unconventional presentation. Some of the models showcasing their collection wore ball gowns diagonally, horizontally and even upside down. Another label that caught everyone's attention was Schiaparelli for two of its signature looks. Doja Cat adorned red body paint and 30,000 Swarovski crystals applied by hand. It took over 5 hours to complete her bold look. Kylie Jenner made heads turn as she arrived with a surreal, hand-embroidered lion head attached to her black gown. Have fun and enjoy.